Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the second event for the Library Talks. We're excited to be bringing some really amazing authors to you this year through virtual talks just like this one. I'm Kelly Chu, as you can see on the bottom here. I'm the program coordinator and I am your guide tonight for the amazing and wonderful Tamora Pierce. Throughout tonight's program, you can ask questions in two ways. You can take librarians out there, you can take questions from the audience and you can type them into the Q&A field that's on the side here. Am I pointing to the right side? And if you are out there in the audience with an iPhone or a smartphone, we have a Twitter hashtag. It's #LibTalks. Our Twitter handle is @TheLibraryTalks. Tweet your questions as us and we will ask them to Tammy. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest tonight. Tamora Pierce is the best-selling and very dearly beloved author of books for children and teens. Her works include the Song of the Lioness Quartet, the Immortals Quartet, the Circle of Magic Quartet, Protector of the Small Quartet, etc., etc. So too many to name. Tonight she's joining us from her home in New York, where it's getting kind of late. So again, Tammy, thanks for staying up with us. I'm going to hand the mic over to Tammy, and hopefully she can see and hear us. Tammy, are you with us? Oh, I think we can hear you now. Yay.
Can you hear me now?
We sure can. Yay. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, here I am. Okay, good evening, everyone.
Okay. So we're going to start with some questions, and we already have a bunch of questions coming in from Twitter, but I want to start with a question about Alana, because where else would you start? So Alana was published in 1983, I believe.
Yeah.
Since then, the landscape of children's publishing has changed a lot. Like YA has come up as category. Like when I was reading it, it was like just a children's book. And you're still writing a ton of amazing books in two universes. So how has the way you write for young people changed over the years as publishing has kind of changed over these decades?
Well, publish has changed a great deal. And my writing has changed, but not in the same way. Where I have changed as I've gotten to know my readership better, as I've learned more about how I write and how I go about writing, as I get more ideas of different techniques to try, like the journal format and first person format, and even writing far more short stories than I ever thought I would. Those things have all come from fans and editors. Those things have changed from what I expected to be doing when I started out. Utilizing e-publication is something that I'm now considering doing.
Really?
Yeah. In my copious free time, I'm working on a project that is short stories for Random House that will be published as an anthology collection. I always confuse the two. Collection when I've written them all, but they will be published electronically before then. But first, I have to write them.
That is the key. So I have read some comments somewhere that I believe you were said to have said that you were, quote unquote, allowed to have longer page counts after like Harry Potter and these huge books like proved that kids will read these monster books. Yes. Is there truth to that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. When I started, if you wrote for YA, they kept you to 200 manuscript pages, period, stop. And wow. I mean, period, stop. If I turned in a 206 or 210 page manuscript, I had to cut. And then when I was working on Squire, the third Protector of the Small book, I ran way over. And I told my editor when I finally handed it in, I was late, I was panicked, I just kept writing. I said, you're going to have to tell me what to cut, because I was over 300 pages. And I said, I have no idea what to cut. And she says, well, we can't find anything either, so we're giving you another 100 pages. And that's when I said, thank you, Harry Potter, for finally convincing American publishers that American kids were in fact reading bigger books and they would buy bigger books. So it was a quantum leap.
I've got our first question from Twitter. Kathy says, I love how natural and empowered your characters are sexually. Have you had any problems with censorship because of this?
I had, to my knowledge, I've had two problems, one in Oregon and one in South Carolina, where Alana was censured for sexual material. Actually, it was the breasts and the menstruation material, but that's it. And that was back in the 90s. I haven't had anything since. Scholastic Library Journal published an article a while back where some contemporary writers for teenagers were talking about the problems they were having with censorship. And one woman says, you know, it isn't fair. Tammy Pierce writes more upfront sexual material than I do, and nobody says anything about her work. But people figure, hey, it's fantasy, it's safe. And we fantasy writers are going, hey, that's right, we're safe.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes the contemporary YA authors get dinged for it a lot more than fantasy writers do.
Yeah, that's right.
So speaking of the sexual quote unquote content in Alana, I believe Alana was originally written as an adult novel. Is that right?
Yes, it was.
So, and then you changed a bunch of things. So the lore goes to make it a children's book.
Not as much as you might think. I changed, there was drug and alcohol use, and I changed that because they weren't really necessary. I did have as much of a knockdown drag out fight as you could have with Jean Carl when I turned the last bunch of pages into the fourth book, because I had Alana using brandy as a restorative, which was, and she said, I really am uncomfortable with this. And I said, but you're a historian yourself. You know that the restorative of choice in the Middle Ages was brandy. And so we went back and forth and back and forth. And finally, I came up with Liam's herbal messes, which actually fit the book much better. Because I did see her point. I mean, we don't want to be showing young people, substance abuse without making casual substance abuse. And in this case, what I found, I was okay with it. I didn't feel I was compromising my standards. The sex stuff, I cut after a certain point, but it still remained. And when you're a girl disguised as a boy in order to become a knight, then your physical maturation becomes a major issue, and that stayed as it was in the original manuscript.
So do you think you would change the same things today that you changed back then, like given the new landscape of YA?
Yeah, I absolutely would. If anything, I am more anti-drug than I was when I originally wrote the adult manuscript, which was the 70s, and I was a kind of a hippie chick at that point. But I accept some of the parameters of YA in that I don't want people to be behaving irresponsibly about anything. And so I make sure that if I have something in there, it is something I can defend. If I can do that, then it's going to go in. And there have been things since that people have gone, what were you thinking? And I said, I was thinking that I don't pull my punches with my readers.
Which is admirable. Okay, so I have a question from someone in Sunnyvale. First of all, I love your books. Thanks for doing the event. There's something I've always been curious about. Why did Alana and Dane end up with guys who are so much older? Asks Maya from Sunnyvale.
This always comes up sooner or later.
Sooner tonight.
It's a two-parter. One is I like older guys, which does not explain why I married a man 2 years younger than I am, except that everybody thinks he's older than I am. The other thing is I base my worlds very heavily in our medieval period, either in the Tortall books in the medieval Europe and England, a combination, or in the Circle books, the medieval Middle East and Central Asia. And in that time period, and really in our own time period, up until the turn of the 1900s, it was expected that a young man couldn't afford to support a wife, so that marriages were arranged. Excuse me, I think I have a sneasel coming.
Well, wait.
Oh, good, because sneezes never do, I've found. Young men couldn't afford to support a wife, let alone a family. Older men could. They'd established themselves in life. So traditionally, you go back, you look at history, and it's young wives who are physically stronger and, one hopes, can endure childbearing more easily, marrying older men. Things have changed, but I was looking at it from that point of view. But after Aram came along, after Numair, I've been calling him Aram for about 500 pages now, so bear with me. When I got such a response because of the gap between him and Dane, I said, okay, I swear on a stack of whatever that I will never have that big a gap between partners again. And to get my vengeance, the next couple that I had that settled into something like a permanent relationship, she is 17 and he is 2 years old, 3 years old, something like that. But, you know, that's crow years. So, you know, that's different.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So another question from Twitter, Jerry asks, how did the spicy food concept come about?
Which spicy food? Ollie not liking spicy food? Because that's me. That's me. If there are a couple flakes of pepper on something I have, I'm sitting there going, ah! chugging the water. I've got to come up with characters who like spicy food. It'll be a stretch. It'll be a hard one, but I can do it. I'm ready for it. I know I am.
Let's see. Another question from Twitter. Shirley asks, do you have any pets?
Do I have any? Well, it depends on your definition of pet. If you mean cats as commonly described as pet, yes, I have cats. I'm not sure that they don't think I'm the pet, Tim's the pet. But right now, we have 8 indoor cats, 1 cat in the mud room that if an owner doesn't step forward, we're going to find a home for him because he's a big, happy young boy. And our older, grumpier cats are going, yeah, these kids, get rid of them. And then the cats we feed in the backyard, plus 2 parakeets, plus apparently a minimum of 6 raccoons in the cellar Two in the attic who must be rehomed as well.
Do any of your pets have names from fantasy books or any of your character names?
No, that would be too confusing because I'm always talking about the characters. Like as it is, when I yell downstairs to my husband Tim, "Hey, John Juggler, what work name would you give one of your spies?" And he says, "Who?" Because he was the basis of Evan Lars, who is now in the spy organization as John Juggler, but he can't even remember that, let alone if we were to name one of the animals after one of the characters.
So another question from someone sitting in the audience today. Who is your favorite author, and do you have any recommended reading?
Oh, gosh.
I know, that is a big question.
That's so cruel because my favorites change every 2 seconds, I swear.
Well, we won't hold you to it for a long time.
Okay, good. If you check my webpage, which is www.tamorapierce.com, and the recommended lists, I do the favorite books of each year, as well as lists that I'm asked to do from speeches I've done. Right at the moment, let's see, who are my favorites? Well, Barbara Hambly, who started publishing around the same time I did, adult fantasy. She now has moved to historical mysteries. I love her work. Let's see. And also I have lists because my brain goes blank. Sarah Beth Durst, Kristen Kishore, Suzanne Collins. It is Suzanne Collins. Hunger Games?
Yeah.
Okay,
Suzanne
good.
Collins.
A guy named Daniel Abraham, an adult writer, is publishing a series. I think the first book is The Dragon's House, and it's wonderful. He has a lot of really strong characters. One of them, the female hero, one of the two female heroes is a banker. Let's see. Deborah Blake, who's written 2 fun story books about the modern day Baba Yaga. Bunch of others.
Okay, in the similar vein and probably similarly difficult, we're really putting you on the spot tonight. A lot of people grew up on Alana, grew up on Dane. Before we started tonight, I was talking to some people in our audience who grew up on them. What did you grow up on? Like, what was a big childhood favorite for you that you would like look back on now and read again, maybe?
Well, it's funny because I just finished rereading Louisa May Alcott's An Old-Fashioned Girl. I don't know what it is about that book as opposed to Little Women or Rose and Bloom and 8 Cousins. I grew up in the 60s when it was pretty much every girl's birthright to read Louisa May Alcott, and I read just about everything that she published for girls at that point. And I think every American female writer grows up wanting to be Jo March with the hat and the apples and the ink, the writing everything out in ink. I certainly did. Also, I had forgotten it up until a couple years ago when I was asked to do a preface to a collection of stories paying homage to Edgar Rice Burroughs that my dad had introduced me to his books when I was in 3rd grade. And I had forgotten until then that here I've gone looking for strong female heroes in books, doing active things, boy stuff generally. And Burroughs was the one that I had gotten that bug from, because he had a lot of what we would consider issues nowadays. But he wrote an incredible number of really strong female characters for his books. The Tarzan, Jane Porter becomes someone who can keep up with Tarzan, and the same with the girl who falls in love with his son. The Earth's Core women were survivors and able to fight as well as the men, and Deja Thoris in the Mars books as well, and Thuvia, the Maid of Mars. So those two, I think, kind of set my path. And also, I read a lot of historicals, and I'd say the third series that started me off was the Iliad and the Odyssey that I read in fourth grade.
As classic as you can get, really. So I've got a question from Mendocino County Library. Is the Circle of Magic series set in the same universe as the novels set in and around Tortall?
No, not at all. The magic works from different principles and in different ways. And the relationship of the people with their gods, except for the folks in the very far east, in my equivalent of the Himalayas that we meet in battle magic, they have something like the same relationship that the people in the Tortall universe have with the gods, but they're the only ones, and only because they are up so high. But they're two very distinct universes, and they are never going to cross each other's realms of influence. When I need a vacation from Tortall, I go to the Circle universe, and when I need a vacation from the Circle universe, I go to Tortall.
That's convenient.
Yeah, I think so.
Another Circle of Magic question from Leslie on Twitter. Why just one boy in the Circle of Magic kids?
I was trying something very new and different at that point, and one boy I thought was all I could handle. I had 3 girls, but I really wanted to do a boy. I really wanted to do a group hero, but I felt that it was really important to include a boy in that mix, and he worked out very well for me.
So now you're working on the new Mare series, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're so known for your female characters. Is it a challenge writing a total boy character all the way through?
It's been interesting. It helps that he's such a scholar. He's really into magic. He's the quiet sort up until not long after the beginning of the first book, what will be the first book now. He's been very lonely. So I understand those things about him very well. That wasn't the stretch. But there are other things that I didn't know as much about. And originally the book started when he was 17 and carried him till he was about 21 or so. And then my editor said, well, turn this into 2 books and start it when he's younger. And that's when I ran into trouble. Because the things that happen to boys between the ages of 10 and 17, that if I covered them with Alana and Dane and Kel,
it's only fair.
Yeah. But they're kind of more complicated, and they're kind of more obvious. So I had to do some consulting, and the really strange thing is I'm writer buddies with Bruce Covell. My Teacher is an Alien, Jeremy Thatcher, Dragon Hatcher, Into the Land of Unicorns, that Bruce Koval. Diary of a Mad Brownie. When he's here, when I'm here, he'll come over every weekday afternoon and we'll read to each other everything we're working on, whatever we're working on, and give each other commentary and stuff. And uh-oh, I just lost sound. Can you hear me still? Tim? Can you hear me still? Okay. You can hear me still?
Yeah, we've got you still.
Okay. Even though I'm happily married, sometimes when I ask Tim stuff, he just looks at me like a startled fawn and says, I don't remember. I actually ended up asking Bruce those delicate matters, which was cause for much merriment on his part.
We can look forward to that then.
Oh, yeah.
It's 3 books now, right?
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
it got a little long. It was a thing.
Okay. So I've got a question another question from Sunnyvale Library. Is there a publication day yet for Triss's story at Lightsbridge?
Well, I'm hoping 2020. The first Aram book is now late summer 2017. The second is probably late summer 2018. The third book is 2019. The rough drafts of all of these are already written, so I'm going to really have to screw up to put them off anymore. 2020.
All right. They've scheduled it. They've nailed it down.
Yeah. Well, as nailed as you can get with me. But rough draft.
A question from Mountain View Public Library. What are your plans for the Emelon universe besides the Triss at Knightsbridge book?
Honestly, I don't know. You show me a calendar that has 2020 on it and my brain just goes, smoke starts coming up my ears. I'll deal with that when I get there.
So we'll wait.
Thank you.
Let's take another question from Twitter. Hannah asks, what is the most difficult scene you have ever had to write and why?
Oh, there's so many awful ones. The ending of Mastiff, because I had to take one of my favorite characters from the entire trilogy and turn that character inside out. The loss of Faithful in the 4th Alana book. Well, see, he was based on my college cat, Fido. And that cat got me through an awful lot of bad times. And so when I wrote it, I cried. When I rewrote it, I cried. When I rewrote it as a novel for teenagers, I cried. I cried while I was going over the galley proofs, and that was on the subway at rush hour. So that one was bad. But the ending of Mastiff was really, really tough.
So do you just power straight through, like right through the end, and then go have a good cry afterwards, or?
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. I blocked on it. When Kel returns to Haven in Lady Night, I had known for years that this was going to happen, that she was going to go back from reporting to Lord Wilden and find that the camp was in ruins, that it had been under attack. But she was reporting to Wilden when I closed the file on September 10th, 2001. I never opened it, of course, September 11th, and not for 2 weeks. And then I thought, I just have to write. I can't, because I lived in Manhattan at the time.
Right.
And I thought, I have to write. I have to get away from all this. And I opened the file, and I had forgotten where I'd stopped writing. And my husband woke up. We had lived in a one-room studio apartment at the time, and I was just sobbing at the computer. And he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "It's burned down." And then, yeah, that was probably even different and just as bad as the ending of Mastiff, in a different way.
So let's transition to a slightly more cheerful question from Twitter, because now I'm sad. Have you ever read any of Anne McCaffrey's books, specifically the Pern series? Asked Carcat on Twitter.
Of course. When I was in college, well, when I started reading fantasy, I started with Tolkien and Michael Moorcock and Robert Howard, the Conan books. And I wasn't happy with any of the female characters I found there. And I continued to read, and I found a couple in science fiction that I liked, but not in fantasy. And I searched for years, ran into one writer who had her female heroes ask her men at arms why they cowered in the corner like so many women. And that didn't sit well with me at all. And then in the mid-70s, we had the arrival of writers like Marion Zimmer Bradley and Susie McKee Charnas, and the creation of the female heroes who were either celibate or gay. And while I thought this was great, we had more female heroes, they didn't speak to me because I was neither. So I kept looking, and I found some female heroes I liked in comics, in the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu comic, and Anne McCaffrey, Dragonflight, less of Pern, and she kept me going for a while. And then finally, Robin McKinley and Barbara Hamley started publishing, and I was like, okay, it isn't just me. So yes, Anne McCaffrey kept me going for a while.
Not a question from Mountain View, just a comment. Thank you for creating amazing books with powerful, intelligent, strong, and wonderful female characters. I think your books were the only ones I read for 4 solid months in middle school.
Thank you.
Let's see. Another question. I want to mix it up here. Will you be writing more graphic novels for the White Tiger Marvel series? One is just not enough.
I know, but it will have to be. That project was so fraught with dissension and Sturm and Drang, and it just ate up way more time than I had at that point in my career. And it's just not something I would want to do again. I did have fun writing a short, a single comic episode for Red Sonja under the aegis of Gail Simone. Yes, Gail. She's actually doing more with Red Sonja, but working for comics it's just too time devouring, and I just sadly won't have time to do it. It's too bad, because I really liked what Tim and I did with Angela, but no.
Maybe after 2020 someday.
Yes, someday.
I've got a question from Mendocino County Library on Twitter. When writing a book, do you structure an outline before, write when you're inspired, or commit to writing each day?
I tried to do the outline thing, and actually to get a contract, I do have to give them something. As I got further along in my career, they said, you don't have to do that much. It ended up, just throw something on a sheet of paper and we'll give you a contract. And I couldn't even do that. I had to do 3 pages. But I'm not one of the inspiration writers either. I think if you want to make a living at writing, you can't afford to wait for inspiration. You have to prep your brain so that it will produce inspiration whether you're ready for it or not. I am a write every day person. I can't write when I'm traveling, so I need to make use of my time when I'm home. For a long time, I set a set number of pages per day, and if I have to get up and go do something else, go read for a while, okay, but after a set time, I have to go back and put my butt back into the chair and get something done. And I can't get up again until I have done at least a page and a half. So I'm in flux at the moment with the book I'm working on. So I'm letting things roll, and if I run out of patience, I'll wait, but I'll try to keep working off and on during the day.
So a similar follow-up question that someone asked is, if you have writer's block, and how do you fend it off? So it sounds like you're a power through it writer.
Partially power through. If I get really, really stuck, the first trick is, okay, set a time to come back to the computer, go read for that time, or go do dishes. I'm not the only one who does this. Bruce says when he's home working, there isn't a dirty dish in the house. Go for a walk around the block, go pet a cat, something like that. If this being stuck doesn't yield to that, then I'll talk to my husband, I'll talk to my assistant, I'll talk to Bruce, I'll talk to my editor, something to get me going again. In other words, ram my head up against the block enough until I break through it. I especially have trouble with exposition. So sometimes I have to get up and walk around for a while and then come back and get through another couple of sentences and then get up and walk around and then another couple of sentences. I hate exposition. So that way I have to get through it. You learn all kinds of little dodgems if you're to make a living at it, to keep going. And I'm on my website, I have all sorts of recommendations about how to deal with this stuff, because it's the single biggest problem every writer has to handle. And you don't even deal with them in mid-career as you did at the beginning of your career, as you do later in your career. We're organic things. We change and adapt as we are exposed to more sources of input, more travel, more books, more movies, more animals. you don't know what will generate new ideas into you, which is why it's always a good idea to expose yourself to as many different kinds of input as you can.
So I've got to change topics a little bit. I have an interesting question from Mountain View. Says, greetings from Mountain View. I have never fully understood Alex in the Lioness books. Could you talk a little bit about him?
I thought it was pretty obvious, but I've gotten this question often enough. I guess it wasn't. The one thing that Alex kept trying to do was he kept trying to pull the rug out from under Alana. He kept trying to expose her as a fake, as a fraud, as somebody who wasn't as good as Alan, later Alana, that as everybody thought Alan was. And when he found out Alan was Alana, that just made it so much worse, because here he thought he was the best squire and he'd been beaten over and over by a girl. What he wanted from Roger, what Roger knew Alex wanted, because he knew Alex so well, he wanted to kill Alana. He wanted to get the opportunity to put her out of his misery. And that was what Roger was granting him. And that was what he didn't want. Money. He didn't want a great title. He didn't want anything else. He just wanted that chance to prove to himself, he didn't care about anybody else, that he was the better knight. And he lost.
Certainly did. Okay, a few more questions, book-specific questions.
Yeah.
There are so many coming in. In regards to the Circle of Magic books, were there other kinds of ambient mages who didn't or haven't made it into the books?
There are, I mean, there's Comas that we've seen briefly. He's the guy who keeps hiding in the attic at Discipline. His magic tends to work better with wool. I haven't really thought more about other ambient. Well, Glocky is more an all-round mage. I think she'll probably go to Lightsbridge someday. But there are other fire mages, and there are mages whose work deals only with brooks or only with trees, specific kinds of trees, only with medicines. So it's a whole world, a whole universe of crafts out there. There are mages who can paint on the wind, who can create images that just hang there until the wind changes and then it breaks up. Just ephemera mages, I guess you'd call them. Mages that can call butterflies.
Another question for Circle of Magic. Do you plan to deal more with Dasha in the romance in her next book? And is she canonically lesbian or bisexual?
Dasha, I think, is gay. Pretty straightly gay. Straightly gay. Okay, that made sense. My tongue lives a life of its own, wild and free. I just follow it. The next book, if there is to be one, and I'm not sure about that, I think we'll put Dasha and Sandry on the road. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure of that. That's far enough in the distance that I don't have to think about it yet.
Let's see. Another question from Mendocino County Library on Twitter. Do you plan on writing stories from the gods' perspectives or more stories of god and mortal interaction?
I am sure. Well, yeah, because they like to stick their fingers into pies, don't they? Yeah, there will be more of those. From the gods' perspective, no, not really. Gods they don't think in literary terms. They just think in terms of what they want. or what they think should be, ought to be. So no, I don't think so. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, a lot.
So that brings me to a question that I've wanted to ask personally. So a lot of your books are just really interconnected. Like you read The Immortals, you get Alana. If you read Kel, you get characters from both. So you get, which is fun. Like you get to see your favorite characters make cameos again and again. And now that you're writing New Mare, I wondered, how do you go from series to series? Like, did you always think that there was a New Mare story to tell, or did that character inspire you later down the road to create a series about him?
No, it was very much a matter of later down the road. I wasn't sure I could do it, actually. I wasn't sure I could go back and show him with Ozorn and with Varese and show him being friends with these people. I had to find a way to do it. And it's actually turned out to be fun. There are plenty of bits in the book that I've just had a great time. It's all a matter of, that's why people should always feel free to ask about characters, because if I don't already know about them, the very act of asking me might cause ideas to pop into my head. That's certainly what happened with the New Mare book. Enough people said, well, wouldn't it be fun to show him when he was at the university? And I thought, well, what did happen to him at the university? And here I am. 500 pages.
Someone here has asked, do you believe you're making up these stories, or do you feel like you're writing the lives of real people when you write?
Certainly they feel very real to me. In the long gap between the Dane books and the Kel books, my husband and I would sit around in the evening and talk about the Tortall characters. So when it came time to write the Kel books, it didn't feel like I'd been away from them for very long at all. They feel like they live in another universe with just a web of whatever is in between us. And I could just reach through and say, hey guys, what's going on? And I'll find out.
So I've got another Tortall question from Shoshana on Twitter. Will you ever go into more detail about the Chamber of Ordeal in any upcoming book?
I honestly don't know. I don't have anything in mind right now for future nights. Actually, my editor has asked me to look at younger characters for a while once I get New Mare and Triss done with. And I'm thinking of going back 400 years to the time when the empire split apart to give us the eastern lands, of which Tortall is a part, and the southern empire, which is Carthag, basically, and all the countries that Carthag conquered. So I don't think I'll be dealing with any knights again, which would put me, I may try to do a story or two though, just because so many people do ask, well, what's the deal with the Chamber of Ordeal, and does anybody else have one? And most of the kingdoms do in the eastern lands and in Carthag and in some of the older kingdoms that are now part of Carthag. But I think their enlivening spirits have departed, the ones that aren't used, that aren't part of the Carthagi capital.
So I believe the Becca Cooper series takes place 200 years before Alana, right? Yeah. And then you said you want to go back 400 years. So you're delving back and back and back instead of forward. This is really interesting.
Well, I wanted to go back another 200 years because not only does the empire break up at this time, but also this at 400 years ago is when the mages got together and exiled the immortals to the realms of the gods. And I think it would be very interesting to be around at that point in time.
It would. I'm going to look forward to that book.
Yeah.
Another question from Twitter. Which of your books is your favorite? I know that is a really hard question. But which do you feel has had the most impact on young readers? Yeah, that's a rough.
Well, it would have to be the Alana, since Alana books, because they've been out the longest and have been read by the most people kind of worldwide. As far as favorite, people ask these questions of writers, and then they wonder at that funny squinched up look we get on our faces, because for most of us, our favorite books have nothing to do with the books we wrote, because we're always looking at them and seeing all the stuff we can do better now. It happens to everybody. You look at even letters or memos or papers that you wrote a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, and you could see all the stuff you could say better now, because we all learn with each word we put on paper. So any author, most any author will tell you that their most recent book is the one they like the best, and next year it'll be another book entirely. I'm very fond of Squire because I had so much fun with Kel and Raoul. I love Raoul. He's so easygoing. He was just the perfect night master for Kel. And I love Shatterglass because taking an arrogant 21-year-old man who was sure he was going to be the Empress's future glassmaker, and having made him learn his craft all over again, only to find out that the last bit of knowledge he needs, the last bit of control over himself, after he's been hit by lightning and has had to struggle to learn everything all over again, the one person who can help him now is a contrary, attitudinal, cross-patched 14-year-old girl. Is a joke I laugh at all the time.
So on the subject of favorites, because we're asking you to pick favorites amongst your children tonight, all your books have had a lot of covers, so many. I don't even know how many covers Alana has had since it came out in the 80s. So cover art has obviously changed a lot in fantasy since the 80s. Do you have like a favorite era of covers for your books that you really liked, or do you just like them all as they come up?
Well, not all as they come up, although I had a good run with Random House. I've had a good run with Random House as far as covers go. And my original covers for the Alana books, the first 3 were done by a then little known artist named David Wiesner, who cruelly, wickedly, and selfishly stopped doing book jackets in time for my 4th book and went into his own cruel, wicked, selfish, award-winning book career.
How dare he?
Not that I'm bitter. And then when Scholastic in the UK took over the Dane books, they got a guy named also David Wyatt, who did the 4 mass market paperback covers. And he did, I think it was 2 sets of covers ago, for Simon & Schuster for the Alana books. And I love his work as well. And Marilee Hayfetz Heifetz did a couple good series for Random House.
Yeah, there are a lot of beautiful ones, and I think there are some new ones for the mass markets, I think,
Yeah,
coming out.
Yeah, Simon & Schuster just released new issues of the Alana and Dane books, New Jackets, that I like a lot.
We can pick those up, add them to our collection.
Yeah.
So it's 7:30 here, so just to let everyone know, any last questions, send them to us now. We're going to start wrapping up in about 15 minutes, so we're trying to get through as many as we can while we still have Tammy here. Okay, here's a little piece, a trivia question from Mountain View. Did you ever give the Dragon Salt Mage in Magic Steps a name, even in the book?
I never gave it to him. He forgot it. He lost it years ago. They've just dosed him with so many drugs. He just doesn't remember it anymore. His own magic ate it. And if that isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, that's pretty rough.
Yeah.
I've got another Numair and Dane question from Anne. I've had many conversations with friends in high school about the love story and age gap that we talked about earlier between Dane and Numair and whether we felt comfortable with a student-teacher relationship blossoming. What prompted you to make the transition from student-teacher to romance?
Honestly, it never occurred to me. By the time Wolf Speaker began, they were already segueing from a student-teacher relationship to more of a working partnership. And definitely by the time Emperor Mage happened, he was more her peer supervisor by Emperor Mage, and it was certainly not a student-teacher relationship by then. So by that, like I say, it never occurred to me. Now I would not do it that way, but to my mind, it wasn't a student-teacher relationship by the time Emperor Mage began.
Okay. That settles that.
Yeah,
I actually have a question about Numair, which I have heard in the Tamora Pierce lore that Numair, I believe, was somewhat based on Jeff Goldblum.
Oh yeah.
Is this a true fact?
Oh yeah. I'm not good at making stuff up, so it started with characters, but it goes on for pretty much everything else. I find that if I have a person, someone I know, a family member, an actor, or the character they play, a photograph and a name, then I can build a character from there. So a lot of my characters are based on other people. And originally, Numair was supposed to be Gene Simmons from the 70s, when I thought was broody and hot looking. And then I got to the part around chapter 3 or chapter 4 where Dane goes to him for instruction. And I thought, I've got a kid who thinks she's going insane and has fled her family after their murder, and she's going to trust Gene Simmons. Okay, do over. So I went around and I was watching, at the time I was watching Earth Girls Are Easy and Vibes with Cyndi Lauper and Jeff Goldblum, and a very ugly little film called Mr. Frost with Jeff Goldblum and Kathy Baker, and in which he's filmed stalking up and down his room with the devil is serial killer, and clad only in pajama bottoms and shot in blue light, And I thought, that's my guy. Because, well, there had to be something for me too. And it's partly the way he speaks, that stuttering and halts and restarts in the middle of sentences where there aren't any pauses. It gives him a vulnerable air. And the awkwardness with the elbows and the knees, just, you get Storkman off him. And he made a much better choice than Gene Simmons.
So on that note, Sunnyvale Library, Christina, I think at Sunnyvale Library, has asked, of all the characters you've created, do you have a favorite?
It's like my favorite books. It changes every couple seconds or so. I mean, obviously I love my main characters, or I wouldn't write a book or even multiple books about them. But I mean, I adore Kel. She calms me right down just working with her. And Triss, short, round, redheaded, loves books, loves animals, wears glasses, bad attitude. Yeah, that's me. But then, like the Darkings, which I think is probably one of my best creations for sheer inventiveness. I have, and the animals too. I mean, the Long Lake Wolf Pack and Short Snout for years has been a favorite around here, because Short Snout, of course, will try to eat anything. And Zach the Marmoset, I have keys. So, like I say, it varies. It varies wildly.
Two similar questions. What part of the book is the hardest to write, and are descriptions or dialogue more difficult?
Descriptions are difficult, only that I have to keep going back and rearranging parts of sentences so they don't start. She had, he had, you know, I have to keep, his hair was, you know, she had, he had. That's boring, but it's fairly straightforward. Dialogue, thank heavens, I fell in luck in the early 1980s and ended up writing original radio comedy and drama for 8 years. I belonged to I helped to start a company that did it in New York City. And it's all dialogue except for sound effects. And I really learned an incredible amount about how people speak, what makes one speaker different from another without making them sound goofy or unnatural. So that was a big help to me in writing dialogue, and I have a lot of fun writing it. Usually by the time, remember what I said earlier about thinking for some years about a book before I actually write it. By the time I sit down, I have the first 3 or 4 chapters pretty well in mind. I introduce my main characters and my secondary characters. I have the main conflict if it's a series, and also the main conflict for the book. I have the first 3 to 4 chapters plotted out, and with me, you know, my endings, they're pretty basic. There's an earthquake, there's a forest fire, the ground opens up, the palace collapses, and the rats reign supreme over all. So refreshing. And then around about chapter 4, I'm typing along, and all of a sudden I hit this vast wasteland known and in the publishing industry as the middle, in which I have to take all my plots and all my ideas and all my characters, and I have to line them up like little ducks so they can fetch up at the earthquake and the forest fire and the ground and the palace and the rats. And that's when I scream for my husband. And I say, honey, how is Numair going to find out that the Admiral's ship going down in the ocean was a bad thing? It wasn't by accident. Well, where did it go down? In the inland sea? Well, why was it there? Because he was the Admiral? Well, was there a reason? Well, there was a storm. Why was there a storm? Well, because a mage made it. What happened to the mage? I'll talk to you later, okay? Love you, bye. Honey, how does Numair find his body? And that's how I get.
Okay, we've got just a few more questions here. Just a quick one from someone in our audience here tonight at Santa Clara. Can we send fan art or prints to you?
I will never say no. Nope. There's an address on my webpage, and you can email my assistant and she will give you particulars.
On that note, do you have any particular fan art you really like, or have you ever read any fanfics of your work?
I don't read fanfics because I would not want anything to adhere, especially as I get older. I don't always remember what I've read and would hate for it to end up inadvertently. But on the other hand, I have nothing against fan fiction since, well, in my day, we called them Star Trek stories and talking stories, and we didn't have no fancy interwebs either. We handed them around to our friends. And that's what I wrote back in the day. So obviously I'm not going to look down my nose at them. And the other part was about fan art.
Yeah. Have you seen any fan art that you really have liked?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I've seen some incredible fan art. I had some of it hung in here in my office and on my computer. And yeah, I think it's keen. There was this one piece that just destroyed me. Someone did Kel surrounded by small children. Kel standing there looking grim, holding her glaive as a memorial for Sandy Hook. And I have had that on my iPad for a long, long time.
Since we are all in libraries tonight, all over California,
libraries.
Could you tell us a story or anecdote about what role libraries have played in your life as a writer?
I moved around a lot as a kid. I'm not kidding. I went to between kindergarten and my senior year in high school, I attended 11 schools. So libraries were the one place I could go that I could find old friends in the books that I had been reading in other libraries. And it always worked out that once I had been going for a while, the librarians would know who I was and they would share their favorite books with me and recommend new books and let me hang out. So libraries were my first best home.
I think we're going to quote you on that here. Okay, one last question. Do you have any advice for aspiring young writers?
Keep at it. Just keep writing. You will get better. With every word you put on the page, you learn something. So keep writing, keep trying. Don't be discouraged if you don't finish every story. Just keep writing new ones. The more you do, The better you get, so the more you do, and the better you get.
So we're really getting towards the end of our time here, but Tammy, if you're willing, we would love to hear you read a short passage from something you're working on. I think everyone here would be excited to get a sneak peek.
Okay, the one book I didn't mention, which will be out a couple of months after the first Numerar book, if somebody more gifted at titles than me can ever come up with a title for the thing, is going to be The Spy's Guide to Tortall. And it is going to be a compendium of papers sent to George Cooper, the Whisper Man, the real head of Tortall's spy network, by various people, and things that have been checked over that have ended up in the little office next door to his main office, which he used to keep for his children when they were very small, so that because their mother wasn't around and the nursemaid sometimes would get called away. So he's now clearing out that little office again. And he's going through the contents of one box and reading some of the papers that he's finding there. So this chunk of letters takes place between the Alana Quartet and the Dane Quartet. April 23rd, 447, from Kittelane of Jeslaw to Cythera of Naxon, concerning an odd thing. Cythera, greetings from your old schoolfellow. I trust that spring has come to your cold capital city. My garden is already in full bloom. Try not to weep, my dear, and the village hedge witch promises a bountiful summer for crops. I shall send along the best of the rose seeds, I promise. When we chatted up at Princess Leanne's naming festivities, you assured me that the observations of we ladies are every bit as valuable as those of our fierce lords. I am going to take you at your word and pass to you an observation that no one here takes seriously. Yester evening I walked on the beach to get away from the continual noise of my household. There is a small cove sheltered by rocks where I like to sit and watch the light fade over the inland sea as the sun sets. When I reached it, I saw a young girl trapped between two large boulders. She was half in the water, half out, and seemingly unconscious. I climbed down and got my hands under her arms with her poor head in my lap. Carefully I edged and turned her, for she was dreadfully slippery. The waves were of no help, surging against her and splashing in my face. She slid, turning halfway so that one of my hands popped out from under her arm and I could only grip her under her chin. I ground my teeth and, sliding and banging my own legs black and blue, I hauled her free of the trapping boulders. Her neck felt so spongy under my fingers that I thought she'd been injured. I turned her head aside. She had the most glorious gold hair, and much to my shock, I found this fair creature sported gills. It was only then that I realized the wet silver skirts that clung to her legs were no such thing. She had a tail. No merman or mermaid has been seen in centuries, but here was one in my lord's humble cove. After a time she stirred and opened her eyes, gasping. I released her, not knowing what she needed. She turned and wriggled through the rocks, pushing herself with her tail as she pulled with her hands until a wave caught her and pulled her into the sea. She dove. I could barely see her when she rose again, standing, if you can call it that, in the salt water on her tail. She kissed her hands and threw the kiss at me as any girl might. Then she dove again, and I saw her no more. Cythera, where in the goddess's kindest dreams might this glorious creature have come from? You know I am not the dreaming sort, whatever my lord husband may think. Even my children tease me for making up stories, but the ruins of my second favorite gown are not a story. Have you heard aught of mermaids up in the cold north? Please tell me if you do, or rather send some stuffy and thoroughly respectable man to tell my household, so that I may say to my husband, ha! You know how we wives prize our victories. Fairly dancing with curiosity. Your Kit.
Yeah.
Oh, I got two more, if there's time.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
June 30th, 447. Korem Harik to the Whisper Man. From the village of Deepwater, the north border of Fief de Wayne. For the last 10 days, I have been watching a family of unicorns. They number a sire, dam, billy, and colt. Laugh if you must. What else do you call long-maned, long-tailed horses with coats that shimmer, pearl-like hooves, and a long twisting horn in the center of their foreheads? These are solid in color. The sire is fire chestnut, dam black. Both young ones are a light brown that blends with the land and foliage here. The horns are real. The unicorns are real. I have tested both gently with my spouse. I got knowledge of their reality and a wicked headache thereby. They aren't the sweet, affectionate unicorns of the pale-skinned people's tales and ballads either. A lout of a trapper stumbled across the filly and colt yesterday. The parents kicked him to death, then trampled him to paste. I stay well back and downwind as I follow them. Yesterday, a hollow circle of magic opened ahead of them. They walked into it. It closed, and they were gone. Have you knowledge of this? We mages need to know if you do. Korem, drinking a calming tea. The next one's supposed to be read by Derek Jacobi. So I'm going to pass on that.
I guess he couldn't be here tonight.
Yeah. August 30th, 447 HE. To George, Baron of Pirate Swoop. From Coram, Baron of Trebond. George, do you know what my little Jonthere said to me this morning? Da, he says. There's people with metal wings instead of arms and claws instead of legs sitting on the observing tower. And they aren't wearing clothes, not even the ladies. It's usually Alana that's the tail spinner. I said, how did they get up there? From a big fire in the sky. Jonthere says, like all guests come that way. Da, they're going to get cold. And behind him I see Alana and Thompson run by with half the linen closet in their arms. I follow my children to our observation tower, and there they are. 7 great things flapping off into a burning hole in the sky. They had steel feathers and claws from what I could see and confirm later, human heads and chests, long hair with ribbons in it. When one cheeky, nasty monster turns to grin at us, I see sharp steel teeth. And my children are jumping and waving and calling these things to come back. One left a feather behind that I'm sending to you. That's how I know their feathers are steel, and how you'll know I haven't been broaching the mead more than I should. What are they, George? Why has there been no word of them? What do all my taxes pay for if monsters with daggers for teeth can land atop my castle and charm my little ones into giving away my shirts? Not to mention leave a stink behind them that took 3 rounds of scrubbing to get out of the stones. I know my tales, Master Whisperman. Anything even a little like those things went into the realms of the gods ages ago. Will you be telling me why we saw one here? Coram, Baron of Trebond.
Yay. Hear the applause. And when is the Turtle Spy Guide out?
It will be out October 17.
All right. Everyone mark their calendars. Well, Tammy, thank you so much for being here tonight. It's been amazing. It's actually been kind of surreal for me. And it's really late in New York, so we got to let you get to bed. So have a good night. Everyone here has enjoyed this so much, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you. It was great fun. I'm really glad I did it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
So everyone, I'm back. Our next guest is going to be Andy Weir on November 10th at 6:30. Thank you guys all for coming, and we hope to see you next time. Good night.